Hey guys, what's going on? This is Tom with the Strength Agenda. Today we're talking about squatting, getting you a better squat today. We've been getting a lot of questions lately about how we get our athletes to improve their squat during the strength phase without like squatting every day or squatting to high frequency. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying we have an ebook out called Sroka, our version of a Russian modified squat program that requires you to squat 4 days a week. But we only do that at the very beginning of the year, and we only do that one time a year. So excluding that, this is how we program squats the rest of the time throughout the year. Just a couple things to keep in mind in terms of building a better squat. Squatting more does not necessarily mean that you're going to improve your squat. Outside of our Sroka program, I don't recommend squatting more than 3 times a week. We do a ton of squatting motions in the snatch and the clean and jerk as it is, so adding more squatting volume onto that can do a number on your knees and your hips and your back. So we don't like to squat more than 3 times a week, but these are just a few things that we program in that I think can help you out. Number one is variation. Whether it's just varying the reps from training cycle to training cycle, varying the movement. We incorporate a lot of different types of squats, whether it's a box squat, a regular back squat, front squats, goblet squats, banded hip squats. We use a ton of variation. It does one of two things. A, it gives the body a new stimulus every time we use a different variation, and B, it just keeps things fresh for the athletes. You can get very bored doing the same thing over and over and over again. So by introducing variations in the movement to the athlete, you're just kind of giving them a new stimulus, giving them a fresh outlook on a movement that they can set a PR in or they can improve upon over a period of time. The other thing that we'd like to incorporate in some of these variations are pauses. By adding a pause to one of the variations I just said, that gives you an even bigger arsenal of variations of the squat movement that you can incorporate with your athlete. Now again, we only program squats about 2 to 3 times a week. Any more than that, I really think it's overkill. Right now we're in a phase where we're squatting 2 times a week on some weeks, and then other weeks we're squatting 3 times a week. We like to vary back and forth, but it's different per team, it's different per coach, it's different per athlete. So take that for what it's worth. Another thing to think about though, and this is really the key to why our athletes improve in the squat, is address weaknesses that may be there in your back, whether it's your upper, your middle, or your lower back, your glutes, or your hamstrings, that entire posterior chain. A lot of programs that I see and a lot of athletes that I talk to, they come in here and they do accessory work with us and they go, I've never done this much stuff for my posterior chain before. Our athletes do at least one movement a day that focuses on their posterior chain. The reason for that is, again, balance out the body. You got to think of the body as an entire system that needs checks and balances. If you were doing a ton of squatting, you're really overworking those quads and working the anterior side of the body, but you have to do just as much work on the posterior side to keep the hips back, knees, ankles, whatever, healthy, okay? So we do a ton of work that addresses your back, your glutes, and your hamstrings. If you aren't doing this in your accessory work or in your strength portion of your programming, consider incorporating some work in there. Variations, ideas, and stuff that we use. Like I said, we do most of it in our strength and our accessory work. Sometimes you can do it as a main lift, but our focus is getting better in the snatch and clean and jerk. So most of our posterior chain work is in the accessories. Yes, you do pulls, but those are a little bit different in terms of how they target the posterior chain versus directly doing it through accessory or strength work. These are just some variations that we incorporate. We do all sorts of variations of lunges. Single leg work is great for addressing your posterior chain. We do all sorts of variations of step-ups, sled work. A sled is a phenomenal tool to have, and almost every strength equipment company makes one now, so if you can get your hands on one, I highly recommend it. You can do all sorts of variations, reverse drags, pushes, sprints, side drags, all sorts of things. You can just do sled rows with them. The variations with just the sled alone for your accessory work are limitless. So if you can get your hands on one of those. Back extensions. If you don't have the money to purchase a glute ham raise or a glute ham developer, you can get a Roman chair on Craigslist for 50, 60 bucks. Under $100 you can get one. So if you don't have the money for a glute ham developer, I highly recommend checking out Craigslist, checking some local used fitness stores that sell equipment, and get yourself a Roman chair so you can do stuff like back extensions. Again, you can do all sorts of variations with the back extension, and that targets the entire posterior chain. We do a lot of back extension work in our gym. I mentioned GHRs. If you are fortunate enough to have a glute ham developer in your gym, GHRs, our glute ham raises, are a phenomenal movement. There's even a bunch of variations that you can add to that to make that movement even more beneficial to your athletes. Reverse hypers. This is one that's kind of caused a little bit of controversy. These machines are expensive. I'm not going to sit here and lie about that. I was very fortunate to score the one we have here at the Strength Agenda for a significantly discounted price. Somebody was selling one on Craigslist from their garage. I was happy to get it. It has been a phenomenal tool. I personally use the reverse hyper 2 to 3 times a week. So if you can get a reverse hyper, or you were fortunate enough to train in a gym that that has a reverse hyper, utilize it. Vary the sets and reps, do a heavy day on it, do a moderate day on it, do a light day on it. You're gonna notice the benefits right away with this, especially when it comes to your squat and your recovery. The recovery is actually more of a beneficial thing than the squat itself. And then lastly, RDLs. You can do all sorts of variations of RDLs. I just built a couple blob handles for the gym, so we have added in even Ukrainian deadlifts, loaded swings, stuff along those lines with the RDLs. Just gives you a ton of variation. This is just a few examples of what we do here in the gym to address that posterior chain. But if your squat is struggling, instead of trying to squat more or just like squat every day or one of those programs, think about addressing first variations. How often are you varying the movements? You might just need a little bit of a different stimulus to bust through that plateau. Then if that doesn't help, check out your weaknesses. Is your back weak? Are your glutes weak? Are your hamstrings weak? And if they are, pick some of these variations, start incorporating them into your accessory work and your strength work, and you are going to notice your squat will improve. You don't necessarily have to be doing more squatting days to improve your squat. Give one of these a shot. Let us know how it works. If you guys have any things that you do to build your squat, you have any comments, questions, anything along those lines that you want us to cover in future videos, go ahead, find us on social media at The Strength Agenda on Instagram or The Strength Agenda on Facebook. Comment below. We love hearing back from you guys, okay? Until next time, take care.